Hey, welcome to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. Hey, this channel is all about home distilling and legal distilling. If you've got questions, reach out to us in the comments below, social media, or via bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out thealchemistcabinet.com. Hey gang, welcome back to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute. Finally getting back around to making some new videos. Slowed down a little bit because I've been very busy with projects, and I'm going to try to do 2 or 3 of them tonight, get a little head on them. But big one tonight is, and you don't have to ignore the mess because I have already used it one time to clean it out and done a sacrificial run on it. But you guys might remember on the channel quite a ways back, someone sent me one of the small little Weaver stovetop stills with the undersized worm and all that stuff. Mark Lipton, great guy from Divided Distillation. And his idea is definitely interesting, just that, you know, that still just didn't hold up for what I needed it to do, right? And I also wanted to make sure that it was a review of, you know, that style still that a lot of people buy and find out that it doesn't work for their needs. Now, some people do buy that still and do some modifications to it and get some good use out of it, and good on you, nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Use what you consider safe and use what makes you happy and what gives good quality liquor. And if you can do it for a decent price, that's awesome. There's nothing wrong with that. But my good buddy down in Costa Rica, Bob, he's been on me, dude. He's been telling me, you gotta get one of these Weaver football stills. You gotta get one of these Weaver football stills. And you know, I always thought about it, and I was like, well, I don't need it, A, to start with, and B, you know, buyer beware as far as I was concerned, because of my experience with the previous one, where, if you remember, I had to build a new worm for it. I had to make new gaskets for it, and it was just pretty sloppy overall, the way that I had to run it, unfortunately. But Bob bought one of these things, I believe it's like a 13-gallon, and sent it to me. And I can tell you, even upon getting it out of the box, it's a way better built still than I thought that it would be. So we're going to talk about it a little bit here today, and at some point we are going to do a run on this that I will film parts of for the channel, because I can tell you that from what I've already seen from the way that it's built, and from what I've seen by running a very low 4% alcohol ABV beer for a clean out run, I'm actually pretty surprised by it. And I think the truth of the matter is that a lot of you might be surprised by it as well, because I think some of what is happening out there in the home distilling community when it comes to these stills is that these stills are actually built in a surprisingly, I shouldn't say built, they're designed in a surprisingly advanced distillation way as far as technique goes. They are single pass stills, and one of the things that I think that people are missing out on, or they don't understand, especially if they've not looked at distillation in different cultures and things of that nature, is that in China, I think really to understand this still, you have to have some understanding of Chinese style distillation out in the rural countryside. These are practical people. Like continental Americans or continental Europeans, they're practical farmers. You know, they're looking for something decent to drink, really, is what they're after. They're not necessarily looking to sell, although some of them do. And they have to be conscientious of the fuel that they're using, right? Whether they're using coal or wood, it's expensive for them. So single pass distillation makes a lot of sense. And we've talked about single pass distillation on the show before. I know some guys that do straight up pot still single pass distillation, no reflux, no rectification whatsoever. And they make some wonderful, wonderful, flavorful brandies that will give you terrible hangovers. But quality-wise, as far as what the brandy tastes like, it's beautiful. I've never been a big fan of it because they're not getting good separation of their different fractions that they need to get. And so I've always avoided that because I prefer not to feel like I'm dying the next day. But again, more power to anyone who does that. And as in Germany, they do quite a bit of that. But they also serve it with beer. So you might have a shot or two and then a beer or two with it, right? But certainly not sitting down and drinking in large quantities this single pass sort of schnapps. This machine, on the other hand, while it is a single pass pot still mechanism, has got tons of reflux built into it. And I think if people understood what it was to be used for, they would appreciate it quite a bit more. So we're going to really dive into this. Also, I should say, this thing can be modified into a pot still very, very easily. And other modifications can be made to it, including with Ozark Stillworks equipment, very easily too. So I'll flip the camera around again. You just have to ignore the fact it's got some spit. It's got some old mash on it from the other day where I cleaned it out. I haven't had a chance to shine it up for the video or anything like that, and nor probably will I. So, because I very rarely clean the outside of my stills unless I just have to. Let's see here. All right, here you go. So here is the Viver football still, or as some of the folks I think sort of, involved in still on the clear call it, the Lombardi Still. It's actually a pretty cool design. Now you can see I've already made a couple modifications over here. I put a thermometer in place of one of the valves on there, and I threw one of the Ozark Stillworks funnels on there because the really cool thing about this design is that although it's 13 gallons, you could continually also be adding mash or low lines or wash or any of those things to this thing as you are running after it starts boiling. Of course, making sure that you kind of keep track of that and know where to make your cuts at as well. So it can be run as a semi-continuous. Hell, as a matter of fact, if you wanted to build a preheater of some sort and build a little valve and hang a box for a preheater to put your liquid in and open that up from time to time and dump it in, it'll save you time on the distillation because it's not going to cool everything down. That's, for later. We'll talk about that more at some point. But just a few cool things about this design. First and foremost, the pot that I had last time, the boiler pot, is quite a bit thinner than this. This pot, I haven't checked the dimensions, but I would say compared to any other stock pot that I have, 100% on par. It's built just as well as any of the stock pots you're going to go buy at Walmart or anywhere else. The only place where things seem a little thin, or particularly maybe on this condenser and this football helmet. But don't beat it around and bang it around and it'll be just fine. As before, I was worried about the condenser because the condenser on those little stovetop pots is just a little tiny worm that is nowhere near efficient enough. This is actually a fairly efficient condenser. And if you look inside there, and I may or may not take that off in a little while, at some point you guys will see inside of it for sure, but you've probably seen them on other videos. It is a stainless steel coil on the inside, but the design is unique in that it coils up here and then it meets a plate here and goes through the plate and continues to coil. The cooling water actually only fills this bottom reservoir, and then through thermodynamics it cools off the coil up here, which is pretty cool. That means that you can actually run a little hot at the beginning when you're getting ready to make your cuts, and actually run off some of your methanol either as vapor through the condenser or through this little valve up here. One of the other things that obviously comes with is its own pump, pretty standard little pond pump. Works great. When I ran this thing last time, I cranked the shit out of it and never could get it running super hot. It did exactly what I expected to do. As a matter of fact, it held temperature at about 68 degrees off of water from the freezer that I've turned into a chiller that I use. So as far as spirit of tension temperature, it's beautiful. On the previous Viver that I had, see if I can lift this up while I'm on the phone. It is a little unwieldy, but I think we can pull it off. On the previous Viver, one of the big issues that I had was the gasket, which, I'll get this right in a minute, sorry. The gasket, which just wrapped around the lid of the pot, and it was just trash. This has actually got a nice wafer gasket in here. Now the cool thing about that is that's an easy gasket to replace or make if you need to. But secondarily, let's say in a shit hits the fan situation and you can't get a hold of the gasket material that you need, that's a hell of a wide band that you can throw some dough on and run this thing pasted up like an old school pot still. That is a handy thing to have. You can also see here, so this just slides on. When I run it, I will be taping it because I do not want that to come off, especially how close that condenser actually runs on the top of that still to the fire. If that falls off, that liquor starts dripping back. I don't use electricity. I don't want that liquor going back and hitting that fire and catching on fire for me. And then I also, just tape me up an extra tube here to get me some more extension away from the pot. I do have plans to make modifications that I will tell you about momentarily, because I think part of the misunderstanding of the still is not only in not understanding the distillation protocols that are used in rural China, or reflux distillation, passive reflux distillation, but I also at least somewhat suspect that what is really happening is that even distillers that have a little experience, they can't see inside the still, so they don't really understand it. So the inside, pretty freaking cool, guys. I can't believe I don't see more home distillers really using this thing the right way. So false bottom, I put me some copper pieces down there. There's copper mesh up in the top. This false bottom is very similar to the Dr. Gratis. It is not necessarily designed, well, let me rephrase that. It is not designed in any way to hold grain up off of the bottom of its own accord. But when grain or solids of various different types are put into a cotton bag that's unbleached, that can then be set on this false bottom, very much so in the same way that you've seen me do absinthe in videos before, where I put the botanicals into a bag and put jars on the bottom of a little still. You can do that same thing here. If you want to make a crazy ass gin with a bunch of botanicals, this right here will do that. If you want to do absinthe, this will do that. You just need to get like an unbleached pillowcase or something of that nature, something made of cotton to put in there, or brew bags that are made out of cotton to put in there. There is nothing at all wrong with that. In fact, I'm surprised that I don't see videos of people taking advantage of that. Now, you know, you don't want to put a huge amount of grain in there, even in a pillowcase or something of that nature, because it will want to float and it'll want to come to the top. You don't want it to plug it up or blow open in any way, shape, or form, or too much, put a whole bunch of pressure on the lid. But you can certainly take several pounds of grain out of a ferment and throw them in that bag, tie that bag off good, put them in there, and be able to extract some of the alcohol from the grain and some of the flavor from the grain. Let me set this lid back up here. All right, so a little more detail here. So I keep mentioning rule Chinese distillation. And Chinese distillation, quite often with baijiu and things of that nature, it is almost a solid state fermentation, and that you have very, very little liquid that you're initially starting with and a lot of grain. Think of it like if you're going to make grappa from leftover pressed grapes from winemaking, right? You're going to have a little bit of lees and water and alcohol and a whole bunch of grape skins. And how you're going to distill that is you're going to put all those grape skins in a bag, put them in the still on top of that false bottom, put the liquid in there such that it fills up the bottom of the still, because you never run a dry still, and add water if you need to. This is very similar to what they do in rural China with things like baijiu. What they will often do is take and more or less steam the fermented rice or fermented grain that they are using for that distillation. So they would take that grain, put it into a bag, take whatever liquid's there, put that into the bottom of the still as well, and then add some water to it. Quite often even they will take rice hulls and mix those in with the lees that are made during the fermentation process, so that they are spread out to some greater degree. That rice hull actually allows for you to get a little bit of rectification from just the heat exchange between the raw material and the cooked / fermented material, and it actually cleans up the fermentation just a hair little bit. Typically in those sort of situations, you're seeing agricultural distillation happening, and again, fuel is at a premium, time is at a premium. These are primarily farmers. They want a one and done distillation, and oftentimes they'll run on an aquatar, which the entire condenser system is based entirely upon reflux. And those are the ones that you see with the bowls that are on top, that you fill the liquid, you fill the cooling water into the bowl on top, the vapor rises, it hits that cold bowl, there's going to be a channel on the inside and then an output over here where your liquid falls back out, but that channel's constantly overfilling with liquid, and that bowl's constantly condensing liquid from down here, causing liquid alcohol to fall into the still, vapor alcohol to come through it, and reflux to hit it. You get a higher proof and purity in a single pass distillation. It's theoretical plates versus actual plates, so you're actually getting multiple distillations in one single pass without the plating. What they have done in this system is very similar to that. They've made a very tall head for their still, meaning that this part of the still is always going to be cooler than this part of the still. And because of that, you're going to get reflux happening up here. And they've accounted for that by having a chamber that runs up to your output right here that is open, but has a diffuser plate or diffuser screen right here, upon which you can put copper packing, or they provide ceramic balls Those ceramic balls don't seem to be very well understood by the community, but the idea is that they're going to stay cool until the steam really starts to hit them, and because of that, they're going to cause both reflux, but they're also going to absorb some impurities as well, because they're going to be constantly in a state of wanting to cool back off. The other thing that they've done is very much like Dr. Gratis. This is not just an open channel up to this diffuser plate. There is actually a piece of basically piping that moves that vapor alcohol straight up to the middle of that diffuser plate. This actually forces reflux, because now the vapor can't get around the liquid falling. It has to go through the liquid that it's falling. The heavier liquids are going to tend to run across that diffuser plate to the sides and fall down into this channel chamber, and you can theoretically take them off with this valve. And as you can see, I just distilled the other day. There you go. There's some of that heavy stuff that you do not want. That is not water. When the still, before the still gets up and running, if you want to, and you do not have to remove your 4 shots this way or your heads this way. In fact, if you're running on flame like I am, you need to be very careful. But you can leave this drain cock open and get rid of the vast majority of those heads, and well, also 4 shots, you know, some of the theoretical methanol that might be there at the beginning of that run can be run off to the atmosphere and gotten rid of. It's no longer a problem. Then close it down and start collecting over here off of your condenser. You can also use this as a fermentation device. They send you a blank. You can take this head off, put that fermentation, or put that blank on top of there. There's an airlock that can fit on one of these valves over here. You can put the clamps on over here, clamp everything down tight. Now you got an airtight fermenter to work out of. Pretty handy in a lot of ways. To be honest with you, the construction of it is actually pretty damn decent. If there were any complaints, and it's not even a complaint, if there was anything where I was gonna be like, oh man, that is super cheap, it would be these triclos. But there's nothing wrong with them. They're completely and utterly functional. The only shitty part is that they're 2.5 inch as opposed to 2 inch. And as a distiller in the industry, and as a long time home distiller, I can tell you that 2.5 inch is the most obscure fucking size of tri-clamp that you could ever put on a piece of distilling equipment. You don't ever see 2.5 inches anywhere in a distillery situation. And the only reason I say it's kind of shitty is because if you're like me and you like to add upgrades, you're immediately either going to have to buy some 2.5 inch equipment, which I'm not doing because I have everything I need and it's all super expensive and it's all set up for 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch common things, or you're going to have to buy some low profile reducers. Now, we have ordered some low profile reducers, and there's a reason for that, and it's because we are going to make some real base modifications to this to show you guys. I am going to run it initially for video just the way that it comes, because I'm going to be honest with you, I think that this still will do all kinds of shit that you guys want to do at home, and for the price of it, dude, you can't beat it. I wish that this would have existed when I first got into distillation. There was nothing like this. You know, I'm out there with my grandpa and my dad making a damn still out of an old used coffee dispenser from Fort Knox, Kentucky. It was held together by, you know, enough damn flour to bake several cakes with. So this is a great design for what it is. I just don't think that it's well understood by the community in terms of how it can be run. Now, if you really want to control that reflux and you really want a higher proof alcohol with compressed heads that you've taken out of the system and compressed tails during the distillation, you can get real super fancy, and I've been playing with it already. That little fan back there will cause enough active reflux on here to get you up to some pretty good proof on a single pass, I suspect. From talking to Bob, it sounds like a lot of his single pass stuff was anywhere between 140 something on average and up to 170 on average, which is super impressive. To be honest with you, when filling barrels, I kind of like single pass stuff for bourbons. I don't do a lot of it at work, but for those heavy bodied whiskeys, could be a lot of fun. But also, if you want to make a real good all grain white spirit as opposed to a sugar shine, which people really do like, and I like sugar shine too, or as opposed to a very heavy bodied all grain double pot distilled spirit, I actually think you're going to get a cleaner distillate once you understand what's happening here with your cut management and your liquid management than you will off of a double pot still distillation. One of the other things to think about with this too that I've not seen anyone talk about on video, which just baffles me, because again, I don't think they're thinking this way. You have that false bottom in there, you can add your solids into a bag and all that stuff. This area here that you can put that copper packing in, or you can put those balls in, you can see that's about 4 inches there, probably about 6-7 inches across. That is a perfect fucking gin basket. That is a beautiful gin basket that will hold tons of botanicals for a freaking 13-gallon still. I mean, enough to just blow your head off. So one of the other things that you can do with this still, and I've seen it mentioned before, but it's very rare that I've seen it. Everybody complains that they get to too high of a proof. Maybe they're having a hard time managing their cuts just because they're not used to that. They don't understand what the rationality of this is. They make the mistake of thinking that higher proof is lesser flavor. It's not. It's differentiated flavor. It's a different spectrum of flavor that you're choosing from. It's different esterification. It's different azerotypes, all that stuff. We've talked about that on the channel many times. You want straight up pot still? Check this out. Take this off. Take the football head off. Take the condenser off. Lay this football head on its side. And I've not done this yet. You may require a piece of 2.5-inch spool or a reducer and a spool or a reducer and a sight glass or whatever. Connect the football helmet back with this triclove down here to where the football is running like this. Take this outlet, put it the direction you want your condenser, put a section in there, say a 4-inch sight glass, 4-inch long sight glass, whatever, right? 2-inch sight glass, 4 inches long, whatever they measure, I can't remember. So that you push this condenser out away from the pot some. Now you got a pot still, guys. Pretty straightforward. Drop the proof, keep the proof at a low ceiling just like a pot still, and should work just exactly the same way and work just as good. See nothing wrong with it whatsoever. You can even still keep copper packing in there. You could even still put some botanicals in there if you wanted to. Something to think about. So some of the modifications that I am going to make to this, because Bob sent this to me with the caveat, hey, if you don't like it, you can send it back to me, but if you like it, you can pay me back. Bob, I'm buying this thing. I'm just letting you know right now. So I've got reducers coming. I am going to put a sight glass here so we can really see what the reflux is doing in this thing, and so people at home can see it. If it works the way I think it will, I think you guys are going to want a sight glass on this still so that you can really understand what is happening internally during the run. I've ordered reducers for up here because I want to push this away from my fire a little bit, but also because I want a sight glass here so I can see when my flow is about to start. But I also have some plans for this, and I'm going to show you the plan here in just a minute. I don't know if it'll work, but we will try it and see what happens. I think for a utilitarian still and for filling barrels like Bad Mo's or making good white spirit in a single pass for the price, this unit is gorgeous. It does everything it's supposed to do. It's as good as any home built still that I've ever made or had. And the cool thing is Wayne from Ozark Stillworks can make a bunch of upgrades for you. You can upgrade this thing in any way that you want. One of the things that I think would be really cool is to get Wayne to build, say, a football still helmet like this, and maybe it's already got a little bit of reflux in it like the Mr. Fusion, but it looks similar to this, and then a sight glass right in here so that you can actually see the reflux, and it would actually be a copper head to match this style of still. My friend from Canada who told me about the air-cooled condenser, one of the reasons I wanted this still is because I'm going to take one of my old worms, replace this on some of the runs, not all of them, because this is actually a good condenser for what it is, but with an air-cooled serpentine to be able to see how that works out. A worm that's air-cooled with computer fans. I think there's some levity there. I think there's some cool stuff. I think for those of you who run at home and you run on electric, if something like that works and you don't have, you're scared of getting water everywhere in your house, or you don't have much room or nowhere outside or anything like that, wouldn't it be cool to have an all-electric still that the still didn't really cost all that much, and the electricity and the setup would cost more than the still itself, but not to have to use any water and everything to be electric and air-cooled? Let me walk over here and I will show you one of the plans that I have for this, and it's basically going to be a piece that will run from the football helmet to this condenser. Alright, here we go. So this is the end that will connect to the football. That's the end that'll be on the condenser. You see I have a sight glass down here after this P-trap. We'll talk about that in a minute. I have a three-way up here with a valve on it. What's going to happen is, once this is on the still, I can blast through my heads, or even do this before I get done with the heads. Place a funnel up here in this valve, kick my valve open, and fill this sight glass, this elbow, and that elbow on the P-trap up with liquid. I should theoretically have an inline thumper. I don't think it'll blow everything out of there. I don't see how it could. If it does, we'll make it taller on this side. But this would be a cool little way of running that pot still with a thumper for the infusion of flavors or the raising of proof and purity. Something to think about, and a real easy modification. All that being said, we'll see how it works out, and I'll keep you guys appraised. As always, reach out to me, bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, thealchemistcabinet.com, and any of the social media comments. Love y'all. Later.